So now it's just a matter of moving our source code files, right? All of our Laravel files that we've programmed throughout the course, we need to move these onto our VPS, or, into our Docker container. So here's how I would do that. Open up a command line, not the same command line where you're actually in your container. Open up a command line on your host computer, right? So perhaps in VS Code or just a new command line, but we want to be on our host main computer. Anyways, type this in with me. So we're going to say docker cp for copy. This allows us to copy files from our host into the container. So essentially, we just need to give a path to this folder that we've been building for the entire course. So in other words, here's what I would do. If you type pwd in the directory that you're in, right? So you can see when I run that, I get /usersbrad desktop Laravel project, our main app. So I just want to copy this into my Docker container, into a specific location. Let me show you where I want to move it. So back in this window where we're on our Docker container, I would say clear, and essentially if you cd into /var/www, and then type ls to list the contents of this directory, you can see that Nginx by default has an HTML folder. That is what contains the files for this default welcome to Nginx project. What I want to do is create a new folder side by side the HTML folder, so essentially in var www, and we can name it our app, and that's where I would want to copy all of our source code to. So here's how you would do that. Now go back to the command line where you're on your host computer, so for example like in VS Code, and what I want you to do is copy this path towards your host source code, copy that directory into your clipboard. Now here's how you can copy files into Docker. You can say docker cp for copy, paste in your clipboard, right? So that's the path of what we're trying to copy. And then at the end, you just say the name of the container you want to paste into. So back in Docker desktop, my randomly generated name for my container is cranky _Franklin. Now yours is going to be something different. So go look at what your randomly generated container name is, and just take note of it. And then back here, that's what you would type. So cranky _Franklin. Yours is going to be something different. Then you would type : and now you just spell out the Linux file system path of where you want to copy the files to. So it would be /var/www/ and I want to create a new folder named our app. So go ahead and press enter. It should take just a few seconds. Now, that moved all of the files. This is awesome. You can confirm this if you go back into the terminal where you're in your Docker container. If you type ls again, beautiful. Now, the var www folder has a second folder named our app. And we can cd into our app, so change directory into that. You can type pwd, you can see that's the new folder you're in. And if you type ls, you can see all of the contents in that folder. Beautiful. These are all of the files we've been building together throughout the entire course. So what we need to do now is simply, instead of just serving up this default website, we want Nginx to serve up our new files in that new folder. To be more specific, right, we want to serve the public folder. Now don't worry, when we go through the lesson where we actually set this up on a real VPS, I'll show you how to enable multiple websites within an Nginx server, right? Because one server can host 10 domains or 20 different domains or 100 different .com domains. But just for this simple Docker example, I'm actually just going to edit the default file for this default Nginx site. Let me show you what I have in mind. So in your command line, go ahead and cd into /etc/nginx. If we run ls, you can see that in that folder, there's another folder named sites available. So we can cd into sites available, and then if we run ls, there's a file named default. Now, if you wanted to, you could nano and edit that file, so nano default. This is just the default setup for the default Nginx site. I'm actually going to completely erase this configuration, and we're just going to paste in our own sort of boilerplate. The idea is that this is where you say, hey, Nginx, I want to use PHP, and so on and so forth, right? You sort of spell out the details for this specific site. We can press Control-X to exit nano, and I'm actually going to say RM to remove or delete a file. I'm going to remove or delete that default file. Instead, I'm just going to say touch default to create a brand new empty file. And now let's nano default to edit it once again, but now it's just a completely empty file. Now, what are we going to paste into this file? Well, remember we've been borrowing code from HTML templates. So in that folder that we've been borrowing from, you'll see there's a file named docker-nginx.txt. Just go into that file, select all of it into your clipboard, copy every single line into your clipboard. Okay, and then back in the terminal where we're in Nano, just go ahead and paste in your clipboard. You should be able to just right-click and choose Paste. Awesome. Now to save this, you just press Control X. It's going to ask you down at the bottom, do you want to save the modified buffer? Just type Y for yes. It's going to ask you the file name. Just leave what's already in there. Press Enter. Cool. At this point, we just need to restart Nginx so that it uses that new configuration file. So to do that, we would say /etc/init.d/nginx. And then instead of start, we're going to call restart. So go ahead and do that. Also, let's start up our PHP service. So that would be /etc/init.d/ and then it's PHP 8.1-fpm. And then a space and just run the start command. Cool. At this point, we should be able to visit our Laravel application. There should just be a couple really quick details and errors that we can fix. But essentially, if you go into your browser and actually, on your host computer and refresh localhost, awesome. So this first error message that we see from Laravel is just that our storage folder does not have the correct permissions. This is very easy to fix. So what I need you to do is just in your Linux container, I'm going to run clear so we're back up at the top, and just type this in. Actually, first, let's go make sure we're in the correct directory. So I would type cd/var www, just 3 W's, and then our app, right? So if you run ls, this is the folder with all of our Laravel source code. Cool, that's where we want to be. Now run this command. We want to give the storage folder proper permissions. So we just say chown space -R www-data:/www-data space and then storage. Go ahead and press enter. While we're at it, let's also create the symbolic link between the storage directory and the publicly available URL. Remember, we ran this on our local computer. We just want to run it again now that we're on our separate, Docker container. So it's PHP artisan storage:link. And again, in order for this to work, you need to be in the directory that's pointing towards all of your Laravel source code. But let's go ahead and press enter. Okay, at this point, if we refresh, we'll probably get a database error. Yep. And this is just because we need to go into our env file and use our new MySQL username and password. So in other words, our command line is already pointing towards the correct directory, right? If you run ls, perfect. Let's just use nano to edit the .env file. So I would just say nano.env. And here's what we're going to do. Here we see DB connection and DB username. So I used the same name for the actual database, right? Our Laravel app. But what we want to do is go down to database username. Instead of root, remember we created that new user that was named our app user. And then I gave them a password. Instead of root, I gave them a password of Cordy. Okay, we can press Control X to save that, hit Y for yes, hit enter to keep the same file name. And now if we refresh, well, we see one more database error, and this is actually a great screen to see. This just means that all we need to do is migrate all of our migrations, right? Because we have all of those migration files that spell out which tables we should have. But remember, we just connected to a brand new empty MySQL database. So we just need to make sure that all of those tables and the correct columns exist. So to fix that, literally all we do is, we know the drill, it's just PHP artisan migrate. Go ahead and press enter. Cool, that's going to create all the necessary tables in our brand new database. If we refresh, we're in business. Let's just go ahead and create a new user. I'm going to register a new user, Brad. Go ahead and fill out the form, click sign up. Okay, now I should be able to upload a really small avatar file, but I believe in order to upload a large file, we do need to make a couple of adjustments. So for example, if I try to manage my avatar and I choose this really small file that's only 13 kilobytes, you can see, awesome, that works perfectly. But if I tried to upload a large file, choose file. If I choose this dog that's almost 5 megabytes, this is going to run into an error. Whoops, we actually don't run into an error. I forgot that we added Laravel side validation. I believe we set the limit to like 3,000 kilobytes. But really quick, I would want to refresh your memory on how to change that. Like if we didn't have that 3,000 kilobyte limit in place, you would need to edit your php.ini file. So really quick, let me show you how you would do that. Just go into your terminal in our Linux container, right? And we're going to say nano, and then we give it an absolute file path to our php.ini file. So /etc/8.1/fpm/php.ini. In this file, instead of Control F for searching, you can press Control W for where, and we just want to search for upload_max_file size. Press enter. Cool, you can see that highlighted it. And then instead of 2M, you could put this to like something like 10 megabytes, so just 10M. Go ahead and save that. Control X, Y for yes, enter to keep the same file name. And now you would need to restart your PHP service, right? So that would just be /etc/init.d/php8.1-fpm restart. Go ahead and press enter. That's going to restart PHP. And now that new change that we just saved in that file should take place. Now, it doesn't really matter because we had the Laravel side, 3,000 kilobyte limit in place, but you get the idea. I could very well upload this image of a dog that's like 1 megabyte. Go ahead and click save. We're in business. One last detail before we bring this video to a close, you'd probably want to go into your env file. So back in the command line, nano.env. And up at the top for app env environment, instead of local, we'd probably want to put this to production. And then for app debug, instead of true, we'd put that to false, right? The idea is that when you're hosting a real public application, the general public doesn't need to see any of those verbose error messages, right? We don't need to show them any of those details. So Control X to save, Y, push enter, beautiful. Cool. Now in our very next lesson, we're going to continue to work on this Docker server. So we're going to create a startup file so that you don't have to manually keep launching all of those services, right? You're probably sick and tired of having to type, /etc init.d. You would never need to do that on a real Linux box. We're only having to do that because we're in a Docker container. So we'll implement a workaround, sort of a startup script that just starts all of those for you. That way, if you want to stop and start your container, it won't be a big deal to get things up and running again. We'll also set up cron jobs, right, for our Laravel queue worker and also our Laravel schedule worker. And finally, we can also learn how to use Redis to improve the speed of our application. So there's going to be one more video where we learn just a little bit more about this Docker configuration. And then after that, we can move on to hosting our application on a real VPS. Anyways, let's keep our momentum rolling, and I'll see you in the next video.